then, we'll continue to talk about the principles of discovery. And we're moving on to principle number 11. And principle number 11 is as follows. You can prove a teaching true or false by applying it in life. We learn by doing much faster than just by listening and reading. And Jesus kind of pointed out the truth of this when he said this, and this is a scripture from the Gospel of John. People were questioning him, and he says, his teachings. And he says, if any man will do his will, he shall know of the doctrine, whether it be of God or whether I speak of myself. In other words, if you're questioning what I'm saying, he says, apply what I'm saying, actually apply it. And then you'll know whether or not what I'm saying is true. And there's a lot of truth in this statement that we learn faster by doing than just learning theory. Like, for instance, let's suppose you wanted to play golf. You could read every book there is on golf, and you could be expert on, know all about it, but until you actually go out there and hit the balls a few times, you're not going to be good at it until you apply it and reapply it and reapply it some more. But the learning part is good. It's good to, you have to learn the rules and the basics. That's an important part. But what a lot of people do is they get stuck in the learning. What the scripture says, ever in the last days, it says people will be ever learning, but never coming to the knowledge of the truth. And this is kind of the way it is on Facebook and the internet. People are learning all kinds of trivial stuff, but they don't come to important truths. But they're ever learning. But getting back to the golf thing, the person will never become a good golfer just by studying about golf. He can memorize everything that's been written about golf, but he will never be a golfer until he actually applies. Now, Curtis, I know you're a golfer, right? Okay. How much do you think how good a golfer could you be without golfing?
Well, I like to watch golf on TV and the techniques and the swings and the power behind the hitter and all of that. But then I like to go out and apply it. You know, I see how they just really hammer that ball and it sails hundreds of yards. But the fun is in the playing. The fun is actually hitting the ball. And golf is a very frustrating sport because you screw up a lot. Unless you're really good, you're gonna end up in the sand traps. You're gonna miss the ball. You're gonna, you know, I've lost balls in water. It's frustrating, but when you really hit that ball solid and it lands on the green, that's the payoff.
Yeah,
You know, it's worth it all.
yeah. The learning, both are important. It's like the yin and the yang. You have to learn information about anything that you want to master, but you also have to apply. So, and as you're applying, you made a good point that even though you're an experienced golfer, watching other things on TV, you learn to fine tune what you're doing. So you continue to learn, but you have to also apply. Reminds me when Artie and I first got married, we decided to take off and go all around the United States and finance ourselves by selling these signs that I sold. And so I told her, look, if we're going to do this, you'll need to sell the signs too. And so I'll teach you how to do it. And so I taught her the sales pitch, and she was really nervous about applying it. And I was wondering if she was ever going to do it. But but she kept wanting to go over the sales pitch again and again and again. I said, look, you got to go do it. And finally, she got up the nerve to make that first pitch, because she never sold anything in her life. So this was entirely new for her. And when she finally did it, she did it great. And she sold lots of signs. And we were able to finance our trip and had a good time. Went through, I don't know how many states, probably about 20 different states or so. And over a several month time period, we had a good time. And, but it's interesting how people are this way. I've been in a lot of sales in my life, and a lot of people just want to learn and learn and learn about how to sell. But if you're going to sell anything, you have to apply yourself. Now, it's interesting that the female energy is more into the learning and the male energy is more into the doing. So yeah, both of them are essential. So the females are more comfortable learning and the males are more comfortable doing. And so what does us males do is we just learn a little bit and then we jump in and we do, and we learn by doing. And the females tend to want to get everything down first and then do. So we have two different approaches. Now, it's not 100% happening in the different sexes like that, but that's just kind of general how things work out. So applying what you learn, and when you apply something, if you're taught something and you apply it, you can figure out what's true in the teaching and what isn't. And this is the point that Jesus has made. Well, take what I teach and apply it, and then you'll know whether or not it's true. And that's a really good advice. And this is an important principle of discovery that is often overlooked. That it also applies to like love, forgiveness, and enlightenment. You'll find that people out there that talk most about love, oftentimes these people that are preaching love all the time, you don't feel any love coming from them. And oftentimes the people that are most loving and giving are people that don't talk about it very much. They don't brag about it. They don't say, hey, I'm doing this because I love you, and I'm just full of love, and I'm like Jesus, and so on. And people are just the really decent people that apply love don't always talk about it that much. And the ones that are talking about it a lot often just leave you kind of flat. And have you guys noticed that before about people that you come across? Especially in these different Facebook groups, spiritual groups, you notice these people that are talking about love all the time. You think, well, where is this love that you think you're exuding so much? So I find that myself, and I find that the people that I feel the most love from are the good vibrations from on the internet, like on Facebook when I'm having conversations. They don't talk about how wonderful they are or how much love is great and all that. They just apply it, and you feel a nice vibration from some of these people that are others may think isn't very loving because they don't talk about love that much. Same thing with forgiveness. Other people talk about forgiveness a lot, yet they hold grudges. The one that really forgives is the one that doesn't talk about it, but actually does it. Same thing with enlightenment. All kinds of people out there claiming enlightenment, talking about enlightenment, but how many are actually doing what's necessary to become enlightened? They got to take steps. They have to learn. They have to apply. They have to ask questions. They have to take steps. But just talking about the theory of enlightenment isn't enough. And people just love talking about theories and what could be, and the ultimate goodness, the ultimate reality, the ultimate enlightenment, instead of just not worrying about it, but just moving forward one step at a time in your own progression. That's the way to make progress. Okay, any more comment on that principle before we move on?
Did you? I
I
was
bet
just
Artie sold as many signs as you did.
What's that?
I said, I bet Artie sold about
Well,
as many
she-
signs as you
Yeah,
did.
she gave me a run for my money. I thought she did surprisingly well there for amateur. She'd give
Did-
you should even give you a run for your money, Curtis.
We're
Yeah.
on the same page, me and Artie.
Yeah, Adam, what did you have to say?
Oh, I was just going to say, I think a part of application and is adaptability, right? Changing how we do things. Like you were talking about the golfer. Sometimes they experiment with different techniques, and golf's a very mental game. And I think of recently, a really good example recently was Phil Mickelson, who's been a golfer for a number of years. He's now 50 years old. And it's pretty much, it's unheard of. It had never happened that a 50-year-old golfer could win a major tournament. And he did that this year. And one of the things he credited was meditation.
Really?
Yeah. So he said, you know, I learned to really center myself and be in the moment. And that helped him calm himself. And so at age 50, he pulled off the unthinkable. Tom Brady did that too on the football field, right?
Yeah, right. And yeah, you got to adapt. That's really important part. And that's part of applying is you and learning. Sometimes you go along and you're not making any more progress and you have to stop, do some studying, learning, adapting to the new learning, and then moving forward. So yeah, that's a good point. You know, I'm not a big golf watcher, but a golfer that kind of intrigued me was, I can't remember his name, but what was the name of that guy that drank really heavy and didn't practice very much, but he was really good. Do you remember?
John Daly.
That's probably it, but I got a bang out of that guy.
Pretty funny guy.
Yeah, he was funny, and he didn't go by any of the rules, and like say, he didn't practice much. He drank a lot, and still did great. He was.
What I liked about Phil Mickelson is he never gave up. You know, he came in second and third and fourth most of his career, and then he just stuck with it and finally won big.
Yeah, no, Tiger Woods made a big comeback too, but I doubt it. I don't know if he's going to do it again after having that accident.
Well, I think his days are over.
Have you guys heard anything about him since the accident?
Just that he's
I haven't heard
resigned.
anything. What'd you say, Curtis?
Just that he resigned.
Oh, really? He's not going to play anymore?
I don't think so.
Yeah, that's too bad.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
Well, I got a little story. When I was traveling up and down the coast, I met a guy who was in the healing arts, and he did a lot with different oils and herbal extracts and massage. And he said, you know, you'd make a good massage therapist. And I said, well, I've never tried it. He said, well, let me teach you. So one afternoon, I said, oh, okay, well, if you think so. So I went over there and he gave me a treatment. And he said, now you want to give a person a massage so that they want another one. That's the bottom line. And I'll show you how to do it. And he gave me a massage and it knocked me out. I went right to sleep. And he said, that's how you want to leave them, you know, comfortable and asleep. And then they wake up refreshed. He said, now give me one. So I gave him the exact same treatment, and sure enough, knocked him out, put him right to sleep. And he said, okay, now I want you to go out and apply this craft. I said, you mean after just one treatment? He said, yeah, go do it. So he bought me a table, and because I didn't have one, because I'd never done it before, and sheets and everything I needed. He said, now go down to Venice Beach and set up next to all those guys that are out there giving massage treatments and act like you're one of them. And people will come to you and you can give them a treatment. And by darn, I did. I went out next to all those guys and people came along, and I didn't have much money. And but at the end of the day, I had money. And only because this guy thought I could do it, and he pushed me, and he said, now go do it. And if I'm going to buy you this table, you're going to put it to good use. And I did. And, you know, I took a risk, but the bottom line is you have to try something new and move out of your comfort zone. And I was doing massages from then on in California. And people say, well, where did you get your training? What school did you go to? I told them the School of Hard Knocks.
I remember Artie and I thought it was kind of funny. One moment you didn't know anything about massage. Next moment you were giving them, and we thought, well, he's got a lot of confidence to to do that.
Well, it just shows, you know,
We
you
thought
can try anything new.
Yeah, we thought only Curtis would move that quickly.
Yeah, but anybody can, you know, I say that because, you know, we all have that ability to stretch and move beyond where we think we're capable.
Yeah. Well, you know, I think a lot of fields could be really compressed with their learning. Like 90% of the time, if you go to a doctor, he just prescribe you penicillin or something. So how difficult is that? But there's about 90% of what a doctor does could be learned in about a month. Now, some of the fine tuning, like brain surgery, would take more time, of course. But with a lot of this professional stuff, people could be trained quite quickly to do the things that doesn't require a lot of precision. So I think we could speed up our development of a lot of the professional services that are very costly, to make them a lot cheaper if we had a large portion of them done by people that didn't have to go to school for 12 years or so. Yeah, I just got a tooth implant a while back from my nephew, and I asked him how long he had to go to school for this. He said 12 years after he graduated high school. 12 years. I thought, wow, just to be able to implant a tooth, that's amazing.
All you have to do is drill a hole and put a big screw in there. Use a Dremel.
They probably learn stuff like history, dentistry, and all kinds of things that they never use, you know. But okay. Any other comments? Principle number 12. It's quite simple, but people don't apply it enough. To receive answers, you must first ask questions. Now, how many people just glide along through life, taking what life gives, but they don't ask any questions? And you're not a true seeker until you start asking questions. Okay? So let's pick on somebody here. Let's see who we haven't picked on lately. Curtis, Nick,
Ken.
Oh, we haven't picked on Ed today.
Yeah.
Do you still have questions? Do you still have questions, Ed? Or you got all answers all figured out being over 80 years
Well,
old?
no one has all the answers. I continually become aware of more reality as I study in the morning and meditate.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to tell you about something in a class I was in back in the 70s, where a very high degree of teacher came through the medium in a seance, and he said, "I want to be stimulated by your most provocative questions." In other words, by asking the right questions, you're opening up to the answers.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that was a good thing for him to say, because I find that myself, when you guys come up with some good questions, it brings up really interesting things to talk about, and we all learn together. So that's good. So one of the main differences between a seeker and one who's not a seeker is that the seeker wants to know. He asks questions, you know. I remember when I was in the Mormon church when I was young, I had questions, and the answer that I often got was, well, you don't need to know that. You'll know that when you die, or something like that. Or what you need to know about is just faith. You don't know enough about faith and salvation yet. I mean, what do you want to know about these crazy things for? And so this is what you get from the Orthodox teachings of the world is, don't ask questions. They have this statement in the Mormon church that they use a lot. They say, don't delve, D-E-L-V-E. The word delve is like a cuss word in the Mormon church. You don't delve. It's an unwritten commandment. It's not a commandment that is acknowledged, but it's an unwritten commandment in the church. Do not delve. It's really dangerous to delve into things. And you remember that word, don't you, Curtis? You've
Yeah, and what did we do?
We delved.
We delved. We asked some questions. And well, you don't need to know the answer to that. You know, if you're supposed to know the answer to that, the prophet would tell you the answer to that. He hasn't, so you're not supposed to know.
Adam was in the Mormon church. Were you not supposed to delve, Adam?
Yeah, that's what I was always told. The other interesting part of that is you would ask those questions, and then it is supposed to be a church of revelation, right?
Right.
And you start to think about it and like, well, what revelations have they passed recently or talked about? And there's really not a lot, there's really not anything since Joseph Smith. But their excuse for that is that, well, we have to master what we've been given before we can be given more. And so it was a way to keep people just precept upon precept, precept upon precept, here a little, there a little, here a little, there a little.
Now, did anybody else grow up in another religion besides the Mormons?
Well, I went to
only Mormons here.
Yeah.
I went to a half a dozen different churches when I was younger, and usually you hear the same thing over and over again.
Yeah, that's a irritating thing in the Mormon church too. You just hear the same thing over and over. And if you go outside that realm, did they ever use the word delve in your church when you were young, Ed?
No.
I think that maybe that's peculiar to the Mormons, that they have a lock on the word delve.
Well, if you did, it would break the bubble that they try to create around their whole story.
Yeah.
I've always told my students that the secrets to enlightenment is you have to ask questions that only God knows the answer to.
Yeah, that's a good comment to make. Were you in any what religion were you raised in? Was it Catholic, did you say?
Yes, I was raised Catholic.
Yeah. Did they let you ask questions there?
They kind of ignored my questions, basically. But I've been to every kind of church you could name. And another thing I tell students is, look, you can practice the philosophy I'm teaching. Just promise me one thing. Promise me you'll never turn it into a religion.
Yeah, I've attended a number of different religions, and I've noticed when you ask a question that's out of the mainstream, the whole class, like if it's in a Sunday school class, the whole class will turn and look at you like, who are you? You're not one of us.
Yeah, they'll frown on you. Like when I was asking questions when I was selling real estate, and we'd go out and look at new homes, and I'd ask them questions. They'd all say, you know, the leaders frown. They frown on you asking questions like that and going outside the line. So
Yeah, that's another key word in the Mormon church. The authorities frown on this.
yeah, they frown on everything.
What's funny about that is you look at pictures of some authorities, they look like they got a permanent frown. Some of them.
Not having a lot of fun.
But yeah, so yeah, all the churches are that way to a degree. And even I've attended a number of new age type things like Ekankar and different things like I attended an Ekankar meeting and I asked, they were talking about soul travel, but they talked about it in such a way that I thought that would be like leaving your body and going to different places and reading books in other libraries in the spirit and stuff like that. But no, they talked about it like, oh, if I was driving by and I needed a parking space and my soul travel cleared one up for me. I'd say, well, how is that soul travel? And everybody looks at me like, what? Who are you?
That's funny.
But yeah,
Soul traveled ahead of me.
I asked a couple of questions in that meeting, and I could tell they didn't want me to come back.
But you did.
No, I didn't. I was too bored.
That was
But yeah, the New Age people are just as bad. Just about anywhere where there's groupthink. If you go out of the groupthink and ask the wrong questions, the whole group will turn and look at you. There will be a ripple in the group thought form if you ask the wrong question. And it's also a political group. If you go to a political group that hates Trump and you say anything good about Trump and vice versa, or they hate Biden or Obama and you say something good about them, there will be a definite ripple.
a rumble.
Especially if you ask a question. If you ask the wrong question, well, what about this? And people in groupthink do not like the wrong questions. You're supposed to ask questions that's been pre-approved of. And the funny part about the pre-approved questions is they never put out a list. Like in the Mormon church, Curtis and I never had a list of approved questions to ask, but everybody knew what that list was. And it was pretty short, really. But everybody knew what the list was, even though we're not told. So everybody just has a sense of when the wrong question is asked, but what's the wrong question with groupthink is often the right question from the viewpoint of your own soul, because your own soul is not into groupthink. It's kind of is from a higher point of view, but it's your soul is connected to the one mind of God, where all truth is one and revealed, which is a lot different than group think on this level, where everything is reversed and distorted. And so group think is rarely true think. But okay, what we'll do here is we'll go through, illustrate this truth about asking questions. Socrates had an interesting system. He said that you can get the truth of anything just by asking the right questions. And he
Who
was
said that?
Socrates. Yeah, and he was having a visit from a visiting philosopher telling him this, and he kind of had doubts. So he says, well, I don't think so. And he says, well, I have this servant over here that doesn't know anything about it, hardly anything. Let's bring him over and we'll ask him a few questions. And so Socrates took this guy that was fairly ignorant guy, not very learned, and he began to ask him questions. And then after a series of questions, this unlearned kid was able to come up with very interesting, wise, and really good answers. Answers that he would have never come up with on his own because he never asked those questions to himself. But Socrates asking these questions, and the visiting philosopher was pretty amazed at what Socrates was able to get out of this person with no learning. And but he demonstrated the value of just asking questions and making people think. And we all share the mind of God. So being all connected to the mind of God, if we can tap into that just by being asked questions, one person or two people can come up with the same answer. Okay, so one of the questions that people often ask in Sunday school is about how in the world does God know everything? Is God all-knowing or what? So let's see where we could go by asking questions to a typical believer on this. Okay, so the seeker says to this believer, he says, is God all-knowing? And the believer says, well, yeah, of course. Seeker says, well, does God know before a person is born if he will be saved or damned? And the believer says, well, yes. The seeker says, then why does God create people that he knows are going to be damned? Wouldn't it be better for him just to have not made the dam to begin with and avoid all that suffering? And the believer's probably never heard this question before. The believer says, well, we have to come here to prove ourselves so that we can be saved. The seeker asks, well, do the damned have to prove to themselves that they can be damned? The believer says, well, I guess so. I never thought of it that way. Seeker, if you were a creator, in other words, if you were God, would you make something that wouldn't work just so you could say to it, I made you, I knew even before I made you that you wouldn't work, but I just wanted to prove to you that you wouldn't work. Now, because you don't work, you're damned for all eternity. That sounds kind of ridiculous, doesn't it? Believer says, well, I'm sure God has his reasons we're not aware of. That's another thing we heard in response to a lot of questions, right, Curtis? God has his reasons.
Well, this whole line of thinking seems a little childish to me.
Yeah, but we've dealt with a lot of people that think this way, though. Okay, so the seeker then says, but we're going by what you claim to be aware of, and that is that God is all-knowing and that he knew who would be damned for eternity. Is there any rhyme or reason why he would create a soul he knew was going to be damned? The believer says, well, so we can appreciate being saved. Seeker says, well, you mean you have to make sure there are others burning in hell before you can enjoy heaven? Well, I guess it's God's plan, he says. That's another thing we heard in the church a lot. It's God's plan. Seeker, if you knew your mother, father, or children were burning in hell for eternity while you're in heaven, would that make heaven more enjoyable for you? Believer says, no, of course not. Then how does God's creation of souls that he knew were going to be damned add to your enjoyment of heaven? Believer says, well, I guess I wouldn't really. Seeker, so why did God create souls he knew would be damned? Believer says, you got me confused. You tell me. Then comment, the scriptures tell us it is God's will that all be saved. So as you can see, it would be ridiculous for a creator to make souls he knew would be damned. So asking those questions, if the person is honest with himself, it should bring him to the conclusion, you know, there's something wrong with my embracing this type of belief system.
Well, this whole system is, again, childish because we try to create God in our own image. The term God is a very abstract concept. It includes the entire universe. And the way God knows all is by a chain of command. There is a hierarchy like in the Navy. You know, each one of us are in a group in spirit that overlooks us and has a lot to do with our spiritual life. It's not like some big old man up there sees everything.
Right, and Jesus says that God is aware of the fall of a sparrow. And I always say the reason he's aware of the fall of the sparrow is because the sparrow is aware of it. And the life of God circulates everywhere. Okay, any more comments on that? But questions and answers. Everybody got some questions that they still want answers to?
Well, one thing we tend to overlook is that in life there is the other chain of evolution, the Deva, the angelic chain of evolution, the elementals. That's the mother matter, the same concept. That's the other side of life that we tend to overlook.
Yeah, yeah. And we have, there's lots of things to know about those things. DK talks a lot about the Devas and their evolution, but most people don't know anything about them. Okay, any other comments?
Yeah, when we started the scientists, philosophers group, our founding statement, the about the group statement was that Aquarius is the age of reason. We want to know the science of getting enlightened.
Yeah. So what do you have any questions about the science of enlightenment, Rick?
You're muted.
I learn new things every day,
Yeah.
I think we should be studying things like a treatise on cosmic fire and treatise on white magic instead of studying childish things.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we're asking questions is something that everybody can incorporate, I think. Okay, any other comments? Okay, we'll move on to the next principle of discovery, principle 13. And we'll spend some time on this because it's there's quite a bit to it. We'll just scratch the surface here as we just have a few moments left. Principle 13 is that which is above will have elements that correspond to that which is below. And that which is below will likewise have elements that correspond to that which is above. This is usually reduced by many teachers as above, so below, or as below, so above. But what is overlooked is there is not exactness in the correspondence. That's why I don't word this as above, so below, and as below, so above. Instead, it's worded that which is above has elements that correspond to that which is below. Niels Bohr was able to use this principle, and some of these great scientists were quite strongly metaphysical thinkers. But he used this principle to extract the idea that, well, maybe the atom is like a miniature solar system. Maybe it has like a central sun that's circulated by things that correspond to planets. We call them electrons. And he had this theory, and it turned out to be fairly accurate. But one thing they discovered is there's quite a bit of differences between an atom and a solar system. There's elements of similarities, but there's also differences. Why is there differences? Why didn't God take the structure of the atom and use that to just make the solar system exactly like a big atom, instead of making solar systems operate somewhat different from atoms, but with similarities? Why do you suppose that happens? This is
Why is a futile question.
What'd say?
Why is the futile question. The real question is, what is the meaning of what appears to be?
Okay, well, that's a little bit different subject, but figuring
Well,
your-
he had to change things. There had to be like differences in the evolution of consciousness from the atom to the human atom. You know, we're similar, but we're different. You know, there's a twist that goes on every time there's a shift in evolution.
Okay, let me put this to you. Let me put this to you, Curtis. Suppose you're God. You've worked through an eternity of evolution, and you have perfected the atom. Now you say, I want to use these atoms. We're going to make trillions and trillions of atoms, and we're going to create a universe out of them. Do you want to make the same thing over again, or would you kind of like to make it new with a twist with differences? What would you do if you were
Well,
God?
yeah, I'd make it different. Like when we create a molecule of 12 couples, these couples aren't all going to just join hands or arms and exist in a room together like a sugar molecule. They're going to go out into the world. They're going to scatter and then gather and scatter and gather. So there's a big difference right there. They can't all just occupy the same space like a chemical atom would.
Right. So intelligence likes variety. So if you create something, just like every year, each car manufacturer makes a new model. Why do they keep making new models? Well, people get bored with the old model. They don't like. They want a new style, new features. We always want new stuff. It's boring. It would be boring to just make the same thing over and over and over and over for eternity. So why would God perfect an atom and then make a greater cosmic world exactly the same, that would require no creative thinking? To make a greater cosmic world on a higher order takes creative thinking. It takes a challenge for the intelligence of even God to have made this universe that we're in. And this universe may be just a particle in a greater universe, but that greater universe, if it exists, would be on a higher order still. So it's interesting, the scripture says this. You know, people always talk about the sameness of God, but it says, and he that sat upon the throne said, behold,
I make all things new.
things new. Right. And then in Isaiah, remember ye not the former things, neither consider the days of old. Behold, I will do a new thing, and now it shall spring forth. And that's one scripture from the New Testament, one scripture from the Old Testament, both supporting the idea that God does new stuff. And how boring would it be to do the same thing over and over? Now, we were talking about golfing earlier. Okay, you read a book on golf and then you go by that book and you never learn anything new. After a while, you get kind of bored. But if you come across an expert golfer, he's doing some new stuff, new moves you haven't seen before, or maybe got a new type of irons or something, then hey, you're revitalized. You think, hey, maybe I can improve my game here. So new stuff is always a challenge. And so what happens with this law of correspondences is as above, so below has elements of truth in, but not exact. Anyone that tries to extract with exactness is going to be wrong. But what a person needs to do, and DK talks about this, is to use this principle of the law of correspondences along with the intuition. Because with the intuition, you see the course, you see what you know to be true, and then you correspond it to the unknown. And in the unknown, there will be elements that will be duplicated because of the law of correspondences, but with differences. And to see those differences requires contemplation and intuition. Because if we try to just go by exactness, we will not come to the right conclusions. And this is what many people do, is many people try to use this law as above, so below to exactly correspond, and they come up with conclusions that are distorted. To come up with the right conclusions requires contemplation and intuition.
Not only does he create new things, but the old shall not be remembered, neither shall it come to mind. So, you know, God goes through phases or stages of development, and he learns to let go of his past creation so he doesn't dwell on it. So he can, you know, keep moving forward. When I was a kid, when I was 5, I had a BB gun. And I thought, boy, that was the ultimate in toys.
Yeah.
And then I got a 22, and that was like 10 times better. And then after that, I got a 30-30. So, you know, I mean, it's just a gun, but it was a lot of fun, and I played with it a lot. But you know, you don't want to go back to something that you've worn out or that you've evolved beyond.
Do kids even get BB guns anymore? I haven't seen a BB gun for a long time.
Yeah, you can. I don't see any kids playing with them. I just gotta.
Yeah, when I was a kid, everybody in the neighborhood had one, but you don't, it's probably good. They are somewhat dangerous. You can put an eye out with one, but
You learn a lot of skill and how to hit a target, and you learn a lot from having a BB gun.
yeah.
I have a question.
I had a good quality bow and arrow when I was a kid too. I become a pretty good shot with it, and my dad, when he had a party, had me demonstrate how I could shoot with it. He was really proud of me. But one of the things.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other comments before we wrap it up?
I have a question.
Sure.
Do you think that God is like a human that gets bored? Or do you think that the elders see far above the way we think?
Well, intelligence applies itself. Now, God is universal intelligence, we could say, and all intelligence likes to be challenged. And so I think wherever intelligence manifests in creation, the intelligence is amplified by challenges, and then does new things. And this can be through human beings like ourselves. It can be through masters or very advanced lives, or the one universal life. But
Well, for one thing, we have no mental equivalent of what God thinks.
yeah, You just have to use that as a symbolic statement, kind of. Okay, but it is a literal statement that intelligence creates, and it
Right.
creates new things all the time.
And universal thinking works on cycles and principles.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, any other comments or questions?
Well, even if we create a city of peace, it'll still be challenged. There'll still be opposition that will challenge it. So there'll be an ongoing growth process even then.
Yeah, whenever you're in the midst of a creation, you'll have setbacks. Like, look at Elon Musk. He some of his rockets blow up on the launching pad, and they has to go back to the drawing board and figure out what went wrong. And the creative process has a lot of drawbacks, but the intelligence just has to forge on until success is achieved.
Yeah, but the payoff can be good, huge.
Yeah, you betcha. Okay, we'll continue talking about this law of correspondences 2 weeks from now. And until then, we'll see some of you at the gathering, and those of you who aren't there, we will miss you. So we will talk to you all again soon.
Yay.
Tell them what?
Have a great week.
Okay, see you next